Hi, my friends. Today I want to present you a new story. Enjoy watching it.
The envelope arrived on a rainy Tuesday, a small splash of ivory in my otherwise unremarkable mail pile. I didn't recognize the handwriting at first. It had been years since I'd seen my sister Kiara's careful looping script. I tore it open with mild curiosity, shaking out an embossed card. Mr. and Mrs. Mallory request the honor of your presence at their 40th wedding jubilee. I scanned the details. A grand estate, formal attire, cocktails at 7. The Mallory family doing what they did best, projecting perfection. I almost tossed the card aside until a smaller, folded note fluttered to the floor. Harry, it would mean so much if you could help serve at the banquet. We're a little short-staffed, and I know I can count on you. Please wear black. I froze, rereading the words. My jaw tightened, and my chest burned with a familiar anger. After everything I'd built, after all the late nights and relentless work that had turned Argonflow into a soon-to-be tech empire, this was how my family saw me, an extra set of hands. The phone buzzed on my desk, and I saw Kiara's name. I answered but stayed silent. I see you got the invitation, she said cheerfully. And the note, I replied, my voice flat. Oh, good. I know it's a bit unconventional, she said, her tone syrupy. But you're always so dependable. And it's not like you're tied up with the family business, right? You'd be helping everyone out. By pretending to be staff? Don't be dramatic, Harry. It's just a few hours. Mom and Dad would really appreciate it. Besides, it's not like you'll be doing anything else that night. Her words hit like a slap, but I kept my voice steady. Sure, Kiara, I'll be there. I could almost hear her relief. Thanks, Harry. You're the best. The call ended, leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. Later that evening, I paced my apartment, turning the note over in my hands. Part of me wanted to tear it up, send a message that I wouldn't be reduced to a waiter at my parents' gala. But another part, the part that had spent years being dismissed and underestimated, saw an opportunity. I opened my closet and pulled out a garment bag, unzipping it to reveal the custom-tailored suit I'd worn to investor meetings. Its deep charcoal fabric caught the dim light, a sharp contrast to the plain black uniform Kiara had suggested. They want me in black. I muttered, a smirk tugging at the corner of my mouth. Fine, I'll wear black. As I hung the suit back up, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Patrick Richards, CEO of New Startup Discoveries. Big week ahead, Harrison. This deal will make waves. Let me know if you need anything before we finalize. I stared at the message, the smirk transforming into a grin. They have no idea what's coming, I said to myself. For years, I kept my family at arm's length, focused on building a life outside their expectations. They dismissed my ambitions as pipe dreams, too fixated on their legacy to see the potential in mine. Now, with the acquisition of Argonflow, set to make headlines, I finally had a chance to set the record straight. Not with words, but with results. I set the note back on my desk, my decision made. I'd go to the Jubilee, I'd serve their champagne, and I'd wait for the perfect moment to show them exactly who they'd underestimated. The cafe was bustling with its usual morning rush, the hum of conversations blending with the hiss of the espresso machine. I sipped my black coffee, the bitter edge grounding me as I scrolled through the final contract for Argonflow's acquisition. The numbers stared back at me, surreal yet tangible, $3.2 billion. A sharp ping from my laptop pulled my attention to a notification. Patrick Richards wanted to schedule a call. I glanced around the cafe, spotting an empty corner booth away from prying eyes, and accepted the video call. Patrick's face appeared on the screen, his usual charm laced with palpable excitement. Harrison, I just got off the phone with our legal team. Everything's in place. By this time next week, your name will be on every tech headline in the country. I leaned back, keeping my tone measured. Good to hear, Patrick. Any last-minute concerns on your end? He shook his head. None, but you should prepare yourself. The moment this deal goes public, you'll be under a microscope. Investors, journalists, competitors, they're going to want a piece of you. I smirked, my confidence belying the storm of thoughts racing in my head. Let them. I've worked for this. Patrick grinned. That's what I like to hear. I'll see you at the signing on Monday. And Harrison, congratulations. The call ended, leaving me staring at the dark screen. The weight of what was about to happen settled in my chest, not fear, but anticipation. As I closed my laptop, a shadow fell across my table. Looking up, I saw Brian, an old acquaintance who once worked at my father's company. His expression was a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Harrison Mallory, he said, sliding into the seat across from me uninvited. Still hiding out in coffee shops, I see. What are you working on this time? Another big idea. I forced a polite smile, something like that. Brian chuckled, leaning back in his chair. You know, your parents must be relieved you didn't drag the family name into another one of your projects. I heard Kiara's been doing great things at the company. At least one of you is living up to expectations. My jaw tightened, but I kept my composure. I'm glad Kiara's doing well, I said evenly. Brian's smirk deepened. Anyway, good luck with whatever it is you're doing. He stood and walked away, leaving a bitter aftertaste that lingered longer than my coffee. I watched him leave, the urge to shout my success at his retreating back nearly overwhelming. Instead, I opened my calendar and made a note, Jubilee, Saturday, 7 p.m. My lips curled into a quiet smile. The world didn't know yet, but soon they would. The ballroom was a vision of elegance, its vaulted ceiling adorned with shimmering chandeliers and draped silk. Waiters moved in synchronized precision, balancing trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres, while guests mingled, their laughter and chatter filling the air. I stood at the edge of the room, clad in the crisp white shirt and black vest Kiara had insisted I wear. This suits you, Harrison, she quipped as she breezed past, her champagne flute glinting under the golden light. You finally look like you belong somewhere. I bit back a retort, my fingers tightening around the tray of glasses I held. This wasn't the time, not yet. As the evening unfolded, I navigated through the crowd, catching snippets of conversation. Unsurprisingly, none were about me. Guests praised my parents for their business acumen and Kiara for her brilliant leadership, while I, their black sheep, moved among them unnoticed. Until I wasn't. Harrison Mallory? The voice was unmistakable, clear, and commanding. I turned, locking eyes with Patrick Richards. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his presence drawing the attention of everyone nearby. For a moment, the clinking glasses and murmurs seemed to fade into the background. Patrick approached, his expression one of delighted surprise. I didn't expect to see you here. His voice carried enough volume to capture the attention of several guests. I could say the same, I replied smoothly, setting my tray down on a nearby table. Patrick's eyes gleamed with amusement. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, turning to the growing circle of onlookers. I'd like to introduce you to the man of the hour. Confusion rippled through the crowd. My father, standing a few feet away, froze mid-conversation, his brow furrowing. Kiara's smile faltered, her gaze darting between Patrick and me. Patrick. I began, attempting to steer him away from the spectacle, but he raised a hand to silence me. This man, Patrick continued, his voice ringing with pride, is about to make history. Harrison Mallory, the visionary behind Argonflow, has just finalized a deal to sell his company for a staggering $3.2 billion. The room fell silent. Then a ripple of gasps and whispers swept through the guests like a tidal wave. $3 billion? Someone murmured. My father's face turned ashen, his hand gripping the back of a chair for support. Kiara's expression twisted into disbelief, her carefully curated composure crumbling. Patrick clapped a hand on my shoulder. Harrison, you should have told me you were moonlighting as a waiter, he joked, earning a few nervous chuckles from the crowd. I wanted to keep it low-key, I replied, my tone deliberately light. My father finally found his voice, stepping forward. Harrison, why didn't you tell us? I met his gaze, my voice steady. Would it have mattered? You've never been interested in what I do. Kiara interjected, her voice laced with desperation. That's not true. We've always supported you. By inviting me here to serve drinks, I cut her off, my calm exterior masking the storm inside. The silence was deafening as the weight of my words settled over the room. Patrick, sensing the tension, gave my shoulder a reassuring squeeze before excusing himself. Enjoy your evening, he said with a pointed look at my parents before disappearing into the crowd. I straightened, the tray abandoned at my side. If you'll excuse me, I said, my tone cool, I need to change into something more appropriate. As I walked away, the eyes of every guest followed me. The tables had turned, and for the first time in years, I wasn't the invisible one. The murmurs had barely faded by the time I returned, now dressed in my bespoke navy suit that fit me like a second skin. My polished shoes clicked against the marble floor, and as I re-entered the ballroom, heads turned. The air crackled with unease, the tension palpable as I made my way to the center of the room where my family stood. Harrison, my father began, his tone measured but betraying a tinge of desperation. Let's talk, privately. Why? I asked, keeping my voice calm. Are you worried about how this might look? Kiara stepped forward, her usual poise now a frantic veneer. That's not fair, Harrison. We didn't know. Exactly. I interrupted, meeting her gaze with an unwavering stare. You didn't know because you never cared to ask. I could have told you 1,000 times about my work, and it wouldn't have mattered. You were too busy assuming I'd amount to nothing. A few guests lingered nearby, feigning disinterest but clearly eavesdropping. My father bristled, his jaw tightening as his composure slipped. That's not true, he said firmly. We've always wanted the best for you. You just made different choices. Different choices. I repeated, letting out a dry laugh. You mean choices that didn't align with yours? Like turning down your generous offer to work under Kiara? Kiara's face flushed, but she kept her voice low. You could have been part of something bigger. Instead, you built something on my own. I finished for her, stepping closer. And tonight, when you saw me as nothing more than a waiter, did it even cross your mind that I might have had my reasons for playing along? The silence stretched as they struggled to find words. Around us, the remaining guests shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure whether to stay or leave. What do you want from us? Kiara finally asked, her voice cracking. I paused, letting the question hang in the air before answering. Respect. But tonight, I'm giving you a chance to earn it. Both of them stared at me, puzzled. I leaned in slightly, my tone soft but firm. I'm hosting a banquet next month to celebrate the sale of Argonflow. If you want to make things right, you'll attend. I paused, savoring the moment. As servers, their expressions mirrored each other, a mixture of shock, indignation, and guilt. You can't be serious, my father said, his voice rising. Oh, I'm entirely serious, I replied, my calm demeanor unwavering. It's not about revenge. It's about understanding. Maybe if you see what it's like to be dismissed, you'll finally realize how it feels. Kiara opened her mouth to protest, but my father held up a hand, silencing her. He stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable, before giving a single reluctant nod. Fine, he said quietly. We'll do it. Good, I said, stepping back. Then we're done here. Without another word, I turned and walked away, leaving them to grapple with the weight of their decision. The grand hall buzzed with anticipation as waiters in crisp uniforms moved gracefully between clusters of elegantly dressed guests. At the center of the room stood a banner that read, celebrating the visionary success of Argonflow. I surveyed the scene from a corner, the weight of the evening settling over me. Everything about this night had been meticulously planned, but there was one detail I hadn't shared with anyone. Sir, it's time, one of the event coordinators whispered to me, snapping me out of my thoughts. I nodded, straightened my cufflinks, and stepped into the spotlight. The room fell silent as the lights dimmed slightly, all eyes turning toward me. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice steady. Thank you for being here tonight to celebrate what has been an extraordinary journey. Applause erupted, but I raised a hand to quiet them. Before we move forward, I'd like to acknowledge a few special guests who have played a significant role in shaping who I am today. The crowd murmured curiously as my father, mother, and Kiara entered the hall, dressed not in their usual finery but in server uniforms identical to those of the catering staff. The sight sent ripples of disbelief through the room, followed by awkward laughter and hushed whispers. They moved hesitantly, balancing trays of champagne with expressions caught between embarrassment and determination. I could see the effort it took for them to hold their heads high. Please, a round of applause for my family, I said, smiling genuinely. The crowd obliged, the clapping polite but restrained. Kiara approached me first, setting her tray on a nearby table. Her voice was low but filled with urgency. Harrison, we've done what you asked. Are you happy now? I'm not looking for happiness, Kiara, I replied softly. I'm looking for change. My father stepped forward, his brow furrowed. We've learned our lesson, son. This spectacle has made sure of that. I leaned closer so only they could hear me. This was never about humiliation. It was about perspective. Do you see now what it feels like to be invisible, to be treated as less than you are? They exchanged a glance, their expressions softening. We do, my mother said, her voice barely above a whisper. I turned back to the crowd, lifting my glass. To growth, to family, and to the unexpected paths that bring us home. The guests raised their glasses, but before the first sip, the room was interrupted by the sharp clinking of a champagne flute against a knife. Patrick Richards, the CEO of New Startup Discoveries, stood at the far end of the room, a mischievous smile playing on his lips. Harrison, he called, his tone playful yet commanding. Before we toast, I believe you forgot one last announcement. The room stilled, all eyes darting between Patrick and me. My heart raced as he stepped forward, holding up a document. Ladies and gentlemen, it seems our brilliant host has left out a crucial detail. Argan Flow isn't just being acquired, it's being restructured. And Harrison here has been named not only its youngest billionaire, but also its new CEO. The hall erupted into cheers, the sound overwhelming. My family's stunned faces were a sight I'd never forget. As Patrick handed me the document with a wink, I turned to my family one last time. I'll need good people I can trust on this journey, I said meaningfully. Are you ready to earn that trust? My father nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. We are. And for the first time, I believed him. I went over and hugged him, tears came to my eyes. In that moment, I forgave my whole family.
Friends, what do you think of this story? Write your opinion in the comments. Would you like more stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button so you don't miss any videos. See you tomorrow.